A parallel for what I do is to be found in the work of an attorney defending a client in a court of law. Say my client is the mainstream view of the past, and it's my responsibility to persuade the jury, the public, that no lost civilization ever existed. Pay attention. Hello, everybody. This is a follow-up to the video where I asked the question, what are the rules of the game? Should it even be a game? Maybe it shouldn't be a game. Seems like a game. What are the rules to the game when we are arguing about a lost civilization? So we talked about a couple different ways to look at it, one of which is kind of a courtroom model, where the different sides or interests are presenting the best case they can to the public or to whoever the audience is to try to win, and they are not under an obligation. Neither side is under an obligation to go through all the facts and present them all. They present things that they feel will strengthen their case, and they are free to ignore things that are going to weaken their case or refute their case. So that's one way of looking at it. Another thing we talked about was, the role of, let's call them science educators. Like me, I try. Learning about the past is my profession. It's what I've been doing for decades now. The vast majority of things that I do every day to try to do that have nothing whatsoever to do with lost civilizations and all that other stuff. Do I then still have an obligation to present all the sides of that, even if I think it's complete baloney and should be called out as baloney? What's the best way to go about it? So my reading of the temperature in the room is that most of you think that people like me, even if I have an opinion about the strength of the evidence, I should still try to be very even-handed in presenting it. I agree with you on that. Anyway, let's look at some of the comments here. Let me find the video. Okay, so I had a lot of people, I don't know what you call it. Maybe call it dansplaining. Had a lot of people dansplaining to me what a lie is and what isn't a lie. The fact that you've openly likened your opposition to the idea of an ancient civilization to a court case where you're attacking it tooth and nail says everything about the underlying problem. Okay, I'm going to come back to that point. This guy obviously thinks shutting down ideas before they can even be explored. What does it say about your position that you're more invested? So, dude, Mr. All Required Fields, yeah. I posed this as a question. Should I do this? What do you guys think? So I wasn't giving you my position. It's called lying. It's lying by omission. We are not your clients. You were supposed to put forth all the facts, not just the ones that support your claim. The burden of proof is with anyone saying anything on the internet. If you are wrong, the internet will tell you. Well, I don't know about that. It's called lying. If you state something presenting as a fact when you know it has been falsified, then that is a lie. Well, that is true. I would go with that definition. I think it is really important to be open and transparent as possible, especially if you're an academic. You will be held as representative, whether you are commenting your capacity as a professional or not. Yep, I agree with that. Leaving out facts is tantamount to lying. Evaluate all the facts and trust that the truth will carry the day. You've already mixed your metaphors. Sometimes you're the defense attorney and sometimes you're the judge. That's because I was asking a question. I wasn't presenting a case. I was asking a question. You will even notice the question mark in the thumbnail. Judge and jury for a reason, because it's not up to one side to prove anything. It's a three-way system. Your side, our side, and the truth side, which is in the middle. Judge and jury. Okay. Complicated. Say it depends on the ultimate goal. Treating it as a contest or debate is kind of the wrong way to go about it, at least when we're talking about making videos or writing articles online. Really insightful and sincere comments. So several of the comments on this video still wanted to talk about the Atlantis and Aryan stuff, and trust me, I'm going to get to it. There's no rush. This video is kind of to address this side issue of what the playing field really is, because I think there are some misunderstandings here. I think the responsibility of the skeptic in this context is to simply respond to the claims made by the other side. The depth of your response will depend entirely on the strength and quality of the claim being made by the other side. If the folks are giving you paper-thin arguments, a laconic reply that is all that is needed. Coming over from Dan's channel, just wanted to say thank you. I think there is lying by omission, and then there is not making your opponent's arguments and everything else in between. It's hard to say where it starts and where it ends. In my opinion, you should just call out the exact comments you're adding and yell at them. It would be great content. Well, I'm not talking about necessarily people who comment here. I asked for your opinion, so I'm happy to hear your opinion. Oh, this guy fired me. That's too bad. Just make the best case you can using the best available sources. You have zero obligation to make the opposition look better than they are. My temperature is that you should show all this information to back your statements, both good and bad, and not picking a side. But Dan did make a good point about experts saying I'm an expert and they are wrong. Back it up on both sides. So like I said, I generally feel like people want an evenness to the case that I would present, say, in response to a claim about a lost civilization. I want to go back to this comment here. This guy says at 2 minutes. Let's see if does this fight tooth and claw with those who insist that there was such a civilization. What if I said that I think a parallel for what I do is to be found in the work of an attorney defending a client in a court of law? Say my client is the mainstream view of the past. And it's my responsibility to persuade the jury, the public, that no lost civilization ever existed. And since the prosecution, pseudoscientists, naturally seek to make the opposite case as effectively as they can, I have to be equally effective and, where necessary, equally ruthless. So I'm kind of surprised, actually, that... Let me get my ugly mug off the screen. The fact that you've openly likened your opposition to the idea of an ancient civilization as a court case and you're attacking it both tooth and nail says everything about the underlying problem. So I'm surprised that nobody noticed where my eyes were looking there. I was reading a statement by Graham Hancock that was explaining his position on the matter. And if you don't believe me, so I'm gonna find Graham Hancock's statement and then I'm gonna put up me reading it and you can compare for yourself. So here we are on a piece by Graham Hancock. It's 22 years old, so time flies. We are all getting older. Writing about outrageous hypotheses and extraordinary possibilities, a view from the trenches. I'm just reading his statement verbatim with the exception of a few key words changed, so it reflects the position that I would take in terms of a lost civilization rather than the position that he would take. So that's it. Other than that, quotes. Okay, under the section Lost Civilization, here's what he wrote. So I'm wondering if I said to you, and I'm not saying I believe this, but I'm just wondering hypothetically, if I said to you that I think my job is to make the best case I possibly can against a lost civilization, I want to fight tooth and claw with those who insist that there was such a civilization. What if I said that I think a parallel for what I do is to be found in the work of an attorney defending a client in a court of law? Say my client is the mainstream view of the past. And it's my responsibility to persuade the jury, the public, that no lost civilization ever existed. And since the prosecution, pseudoscientists, naturally seek to make the opposite case as effectively as they can, I have to be equally effective and, where necessary, equally ruthless. So I'm going to be selective with the evidence that I present. And of course, I'm selective. It's not my job to show my client in a bad light. Interesting part at the end here, I don't care about the rules of the game here because it isn't a game and there are no rules. The 20th century witnessed the emergence of an overwhelming academic consensus, supported in the media and at all levels of the education system, that no lost civilization lies forgotten in the human past. This consensus is so strongly reinforced that no serious research has been done on the subject for more than 50 years, and not a single academic institution in the Western world presently has a faculty of lost civilization studies. Exclamation point. What an outrage. And I'm proud that orthodox thinkers who would prefer to have ignored us have been compelled into a backlash. So if you think that Graham Hancock is playing the role of an even-handed person who is presenting to you the entire case, warts and all, and letting you decide for yourself and just asking questions, I refer you to this piece that he wrote about how he sees himself. Not only does he not see his role as to present both sides and have that kind of discussion, but he acknowledges that there, in fact, are no rules. There are none. I don't care about the rules of the game here because it isn't a game and there are no rules. So I understand that a lot of you out there who are fascinated by this idea of a lost civilization want to hear other things from professionals other than that's bullshit, that's stupid, those ideas have a racist history. I get it. But put yourself in our shoes for a moment. We are dealing with someone who has the megaphone of 2 seasons of a Netflix series now, who has best-selling books, who is platformed on the Joe Rogan show. Is that the biggest podcast, the most popular podcast in the world? I think so. Maybe not. I don't know. It's a frustrating place to be in, to be told that we have to simply educate and nip around the edges of these ideas and claims and be very polite and leave enough mystery so that it still makes people feel good It's a tough ask. I taught a class in South Carolina for 3 years where I used pseudo-archaeological claims to teach students something about critical thinking. Not all claims about the past are equally credible. They simply are not. This idea that, hey, I wasn't there, you weren't there, so neither of us really knows what happened, so let's just make up a bunch of stories. And then whichever one we like the most, we'll argue for. That's not how it works. Maybe that is how it works. That's not how it should work. There are ways to evaluate claims about the past to determine if they're credible or not. And a lot of the claims associated with lost civilization stuff are not credible. They have been shown to be false. Some of them have been shown to be false over and over again and from a long time ago. It's what makes pseudoscience is the lack of this mechanism for throwing out bad information. They want to pretend that they are being scientific, but they are not. They're holding on to things, whether they are true or not, that they think help them tell the story. It's at the core of so much of pseudoscience. We know more about the past today. We have more reliable information about the human past than we did 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 150 years ago. And it's because we have been employing a scientific framework to winnow away ideas that are incorrect and work on those that are shown to be reliable. When Graham Hancock says archaeologists think they're doing science because we use a lot of numbers, he is creating a little bit of a straw man there. That's not why archaeology is scientific. Not at all. We do a lot of things quantitatively, at least some of us do. But that's not what makes it scientific. What makes it scientific is embedding within this loop of induction and deduction the ability to falsify your ideas based on the collection of evidence. That is an empirical framework. The numbers come with the empirical stuff, but that's not why we're claiming to be a science, because we measure things. That's kind of more of a symptom of being a science than a core foundational part of it. Anyway, what I wanted you guys to take away from this is that I agree with you. It is important for people like me who are trying to replace some of the bullshit out there with real or better or more contextualized information and perspective to be honest, fair. That's all great. I am not going to present Graham Hancock's case for him. He sees himself as an attorney with a client, and he is prosecuting an argument. It is not my job to do that for him. I see my job as to poke holes in his argument and tell you not only that I think that things are wrong or off or don't make sense logically or factually, but to also explain why. That's not a super simple, easy thing to do a lot of the time. And, this channel has 1,500 subscribers and change at this point. I don't have millions of people hanging on my every word and inviting me to host television programs and do other things. That's not the voice that I have. I have the voice that I have, and I'm going to use it how I see fit when I have the time to use it. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of you guys, and especially the people who come here wanting to be angry at professional archaeologists and, say that, you should be telling us just the facts and you should, stick to within your expertise. When I do make videos about real archaeological stuff like stratigraphy and features and things like that, people don't watch them. That's not the stuff that sells. When you see these programs on TV and they get a professional archaeologist involved, that gets boring really quickly for the TV audience, because you know what? It's not like Indiana Jones. Producers have been hard pressed to figure out how to make what actual archaeologists do to be exciting enough to sell a bunch of ads. Graham Hancock can do that fairly easily, and he's shown that. He's a showman. He's a good speaker. He can make what seems like a compelling case when there is no alternate voice there to question that. I think that's why some of us see that as our role. There's not some kind of archaeological establishment mafia. As a person who cares about the past and who does think it's important to get it right for all kinds of reasons that a lot of you guys want to dismiss as unimportant, and archaeology doesn't really matter, so why are you getting so upset? I think you can point to a number of cases in the human past where controlling the narrative and being able to put out a false narrative has led to a great deal of human suffering, and it is weaponized even today. So it actually does matter. Is that something that I can solve on my own? No, absolutely not. But as a person who decided to be, somewhat of a public academic, I'm going to do what I can to do my part. And I think other professional archaeologists should do the same. And I have been saying that for years. And I think that, you have to acknowledge in this role that the playing field is not even, and the public doesn't necessarily want it to be even. I often joke that, most of the people who come here to watch my videos don't like me. I don't really know whether that's the case or not. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. Sometimes I'm going to be successful at getting a point across or a message, and sometimes I'm not, and that's just the way it goes. Surely there are some things that I could do more constructively, and, I could pick a different path on some topics. I could not talk about some things, not others. So sure, I'm a human, just like everybody else is. Anyway, bottom line, playing field, not level, and people don't really want it to be level. The public is fickle. On the one hand, they want their fantasy with all of this imagination embedded and entangled in it, spoon-fed to them by people like Graham Hancock. And along with that spoon-fed message comes a message that archaeologists are not to be trusted. We are arrogant. We have gotten the past all wrong. We are hiding things. And in the face of that, those of us who take this stuff seriously and who don't see it as a court case or a sales job are expected to sit on our hands and be very polite and allow a lot of this mystery that makes people feel good to persist, whether or not it's harmful, false, whatever. And we're supposed to stick within the kind of like narrow confines of our expertise. And as an academic, anything that I talk on, I should be an expert in. And that's baloney. And as Graham Hancock pointed out, there are no, what did he say? No one in the Western world has a faculty of lost civilization studies. I'm pretty sure that's probably still true in 2024. Thank goodness. There are people like me who say, you know what? I would like to see the public have a realistic take on the human past that is very interesting in and of its own right. And I would like people to understand what it is that archaeologists do and how we do it. There's a lot of variety in this field, and I know best, of course, what I do. I have some inkling what a lot of other people do too, and I think I understand the goals and the methods broadly. My area of expertise is in Eastern North America. I've also worked in Europe and the Pacific briefly. I know the broad outlines of world history, world prehistory, taught human evolution. It's a big field. And it's easy enough, I think, for people like Graham Hancock to come along with their perspective that they are prosecuting a court case and they are going to pick and choose selectively. What's the line he uses? Certainly is true, as my critics have pointed out, that I am selective with the evidence I present. Of course I'm selective. It isn't my job to show my client in a bad light. He picks and chooses and he makes his case. And he can make that case through a very, very loud megaphone. And the rest of us are kind of left wondering, what are we supposed to do? Because I don't think it's responsible to just let him say these things that are not true, that don't make any sense, and that have some really nasty history to them without trying to explain that stuff. So, we do what we can. I actually have a proposal. I had a thought this morning for maybe a different way to look at this stuff. And I don't know whether it's a good idea or not. And it's probably a total, pie in the sky dream. I'll save that for another video. Anyway, thank you everyone who commented. Just in case you made it to the end here and you didn't get the point, all that stuff about being selective and being a lawyer, that was Graham Hancock talking, not me. So if you take offense at that sentiment, you either have to be taking offense at his perspective, or you have to acknowledge that your perspective is that the playing field is and should be very, very uneven. And professionals are supposed to act in a completely different way than people like Hancock, who are lawyers and salesmen at the end of the day. So I want you to keep that in mind when you're trying to understand perhaps where some of the frustration comes from. And I will continue, as I have in the past, to try to do the best job that I can to communicate things that I think are important in a way that is constructive. Will I always be successful at that? Probably not, but you can stay tuned and find out. And that is all I wanted to say about that for now. Thank you. Have a good evening.